What gives a brand its soul? Is it the logo? Is it the product? Or is it the marketing? Or is it something much deeper? Today's episode, we're diving into real heartbeat of business with Joe Gulesserian, lifelong entrepreneur, brand creator, author, and founder of Brands Fifth Avenue. Joe believes it's not just something you learn in the classroom, it's the survival kit. And in a world being shaped by AI, inflation, competition, and constant change, understanding your brand, your purpose, and the economic forces around you has never been so important. If you're an entrepreneur, a business owner, a creator, or someone trying to stand out in this noisy world, this conversation will challenge you in the way you think about branding, business, and also what it really means to build something with meaning. Welcome back to the Champion Mindset Collective podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Dahya. Now, did you know that 80% of listeners are not subscribed? People have been watching these episodes, but they're not subscribed. So please do yourself a favor so you don't miss any future episodes. And please subscribe so that we can get this out to the wider world. Today's guest is Joe Gulesserian. He comes to us with a rich background as a lifelong entrepreneur and the driving force behind Brands Fifth Avenue. He's a seasoned brand creator and expert in consumer packaged goods. He has a deep understanding of manufacturing, coupled with a keen insight into leveraging AI for the competitive advantage. Joe is also an accomplished author, being penned the Practical MBA on Economics, what they do not teach you at business school in 2022, and his upcoming Guerrilla Guide for Entrepreneurs and the Rest of Us in 2026. His work consistently highlights his belief that business acumen is fundamental survival skill, empowering individuals in all walks of life. Joe's insight into brand design, entrepreneurship, and economics, particular inflation, making him a truly invaluable voice. Joe, welcome to the Champion Mindset Collective podcast.
Thank you for having me on your show, Anthony. I look forward to it.
It's an absolute pleasure, Joe. Joe, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your journey in life. We've just read through some of the amazing things that you've done and what you're doing. Tell us, how did you get here?
Well, I got involved in health and beauty care, and I got involved in my late 20s in health and beauty care. I didn't enjoy high school, but I did better at university. Originally, by trade, I'm a toolmaker. I've done some undergraduate engineering as well. And I learned that from my father, of course. And I dropped out of there. I did my MBA when I hit about 30 years old or so. I studied in UK, but I spent, I'd say, in the last 30 years or so, with the exception of 3 years when I lived in California, I've worked on my own. So I don't know how to do things otherwise. I have a great feel for brands. I can look at stuff. I'm not perfect, but I can look at stuff. I get a feel for what's going to sell. So that comes on an intrinsic basis. Maybe it comes from instincts, maybe it comes from experience, or maybe a little bit of good Irish luck. Who knows? But somewhere it comes. That's what I've done. I worked for 3 years as a professor. I taught corporate finance. I taught stats. I taught postgraduate marketing. And the students were lovely. What I did miss when I taught was going back into lion's den and getting scratched every day and, peeling off the Band-Aids and so forth. So yeah, I missed, I think, the self-inflicted abuse. And that's what, in some sense as entrepreneurs, yeah, we do that. And so, yeah, that's my short story.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm looking forward to unpacking your life further, and also what you're doing. So, Joe, your upcoming book, Guerrilla Guide for Entrepreneurs and the Rest of Us, talks about breaking away from the chains of normative expectation to thrive and find purpose. Could you unpack this for us a little bit?
Sure, I can unpack it. I wrote this book. It is on the market right now. And I wrote this book. Took me about a year and a half, another 8 months of editing. If you're going to write a book, by the way, editing's just brutal. And, because you write in a microcosm, you're by yourself when you write, and then you get one person to read it. In my case, it was my other half and my finer half. And she says, you got to take that stuff out because I'm not going to bail you out of jail. And she just made it smoother. And then we went to professional editing after that. So there's a lot of books, and look, I need to be motivated. I need to be positive. When you've got $150,000 bill facing you Tuesday morning, that might not help you. When you've got to make payroll, positivity might not help you. And I'm not knocking that. I've read Anthony Robbins. There's many other great motivators out there. I'm not knocking that. I didn't write a book that's, you can do it and you got to do it my way because I've got my secret sauce formula and this is how I did it. And, this is the way it was done since the blizzard of 1821. It was not that kind of a book. So what I did is I mixed an MBA. I mixed that with the streets. I started the first chapter off saying, what is the history of the emulator versus the pioneer? Who wins? Who loses? And I'm going off the top of my head here. And the second chapter went to the 12 greatest entrepreneurs that changed the course of civilization. And anytime you see a seismic shift, maybe in AI, maybe the invention of electricity, there's going to be the deniers. When you see a seismic shift, there's always an entrepreneur present in human history. The private markets are incredible, not perfect, but they're incredible at delivering. We maybe take this for granted, but you and I probably live better. The average person probably lives better than someone in opulence, even 50 years ago, never mind 100 years ago. I guarantee you, you have more personal luxuries than Queen Victoria. We all do.
Mm.
And so that's the progression of technology and entrepreneurs and um, luxuries, wants becoming luxuries and luxuries become normative, right? Maybe in cars and so on and so forth. So then I wrote about AI for competitive advantage. I wrote a fair bit about branding, the look, the feel, and then I wrote about my mentors and the people who touched me. And there's about 4 or 5 of them. And I then wrote the future of business, social media strategies, and the future of business. What's the world going to look like in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? And I wrote more than, well, artificial intelligence is going to be a seismic shift, and that's all. That's salad's healthy to eat, not to talk. So I delivered the beef. I gave you, by the way, a lot of strategies in the book, a lot of hands-on strategies, like, taught in business school, taught outside of business school. And every 15, 20 pages, I'd give you tales from the streets. You might not know this, but when I was in my 20s and even up to my early 30s, I used to assist a bailiff. I've also assisted a repo man. I was an assistant repo man. So I've been called a lot of names. And for those not familiar with it, but I also learned, and it's in my book, when to cut the cord. Because sometimes we'd shut down businesses that were behind on rents or various other liabilities. And we'd walk in there and I told Boyd at the time, I go, how can you do something like this? It's just, we're pretty well shut down the guy's company. What are we doing here? And he says, no, I'm not hurting their feelings. I'm giving them their relief and letting them know that they don't have to put a third and fourth mortgage on their house. They can go back to their wives and just say, you know what? We got to try something a bit different. You've got it. So I learned from all of them. I won't go into a long speech. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, thank you for that. What does it look like in the real world for entrepreneurs or for those who might just not identify as traditional entrepreneurs?
Wow. Okay, that's a good question. I'm going to give you 2 analogies there and I'll keep it short. In life, when it comes to our livelihoods, you have 2 choices. You can work for someone and suffer at their hands, or you can work for yourself and build an enterprise and suffer with your own hands. Either way, the choice is yours. Either way, you must suffer.
Hmm.
So there's some entrepreneurs that have done very well and they're going to milk it for all they can at this point. They probably won't shift into the AI and some of the other technologies going on. For the ones trying to get in, understand, for me running a business, for you running an enterprise, they might look at someone who doesn't have their own company, might look and say, oh, this guy's taking big risks. No, I say you're taking more big risks because what you are in a sense is you're working for a company. There's going to be massive unemployment from this AI. And that's another speech we can go into, universal basic income, so on and so forth. You're taking the risk. You're renting yourself out. You're going to pay massive taxes. You're going to end up being nothing more, in a sense, an ATM machine for the government so they can squander, right? So you are taking the risk of uncertainty in a different facet. I'm not saying entrepreneurialism is for everybody, but there's what you want to do if you want to go corporate, which you can do very well. I'm not knocking it. If you want to do corporate, you want a set of nimble skills, and my book delivers it. I try and deliver it, that you can use within the umbrella of a corporation. A good example is if you are a top-notch salesperson who's bringing in $3, $4, $5 million a year business, $10 million a year of business, you could be a rebel. You can talk back to your boss. You can be crusty. You can tell people, well, you know what? I'm going to do my rendition of James Dean and I'm going to be, I'm not saying you should. I mean, diplomacy is always the best way. But if you have skills like that in an organization, or you just are an expert at artificial intelligence and how the IT systems works and reconciling it with social media, you've got some cult in there. They can't just blow you out the door. This is not your standard, running the accounting department. So you have to go into those tiny, tiny niches, and then after I
Mm.
write the book and then I speak to some interesting people like you, I go, maybe I could have said other things too, but I'm saying,
Yeah, yes, it's interesting, right? I spent 25, 30 years in corporate, and you definitely don't have the freedom that you do as an entrepreneur to be able to, I guess, shape your business and shape your life. You are boxed into some rules, and this is the way it is. So I guess if you're, as you said before, entrepreneurship is not for everyone. It's not a walk in the park. And also, as you mentioned before, is that either way you're going to go through some suffering. The question is, do you want to suffer at someone else's hand or at your own? And the thing is, especially when you get to our age, it's like I'm 55 now, and it's like when you get to that 50s and above,
yeah.
you start thinking about, like, okay, have I had enough of this table tennis or tennis game, being beaten from here to here, and do I want to, like, now do something different that's actually going to build up my own life? So that's been my experience, is that after multiple redundancies, and this is the other thing I noticed, is that I remember in the early days of working, redundancy wasn't a common thing. It happened every now and then. But then working in telecommunications, I found that every 6 months we had restructures. Every 6 months people were leaving the business. What I found is that it got more and more and more and more, and the timeline for the redundancies actually got shorter and shorter and shorter. So yeah, I guess you've got to weigh up what kind of life you want to be living as an employee or an entrepreneur.
Yes, exactly. That's very well said. And you actually said exactly what I did there, but the uncertainty and so forth and how you want to suffer. I couldn't have said it better
Yeah,
myself. But
yeah.
I had a little lesson. I didn't know it when I was a kid. My dad opened up his small tooling company. My dad did okay. He came from a very difficult background, but he was really one of these master technicians, and that's what got him through. He didn't even know an accounting equation, man. He had no idea. It didn't matter to him. So, anyways, he had his small shop that he opened up, and I watched him. And he had anxiety, and one of the things is if you have a sales background, you can do anything in this world. You can always find a way to survive if you can pitch, because pitching in sales, and it's in my chapter, is nothing more than the art of seduction, right? Something like being like a politician, but you don't lie. You've actually got to come up with products and deliver the goods. But, it's a form of seduction. So I worked for him when I was 12, 13 years old in the summers, right? I had his business cards. I was a newspaper boy. I canvassed maybe 4 or 5 thousand doors. I made good dollars. I was making for a kid. I was like, you kidding? So, for being a kid. So I was not, if people rejected me, I had no feelings towards it because I didn't know at the time. So I'm not coming up and saying, oh, I know at the time. I saw my mom, and she worked at Hartford Insurance, and she was a policy rater, underwriter type. She brought in steady paychecks. I saw my dad, and there might not be a paycheck on Friday. I didn't realize at the time, but I became acclimatized to it.
Mm,
He was not like this, my dad was not like this, high strung entrepreneur and all, but he worked and worked and worked. So I became climatized to the culture of uncertainty through my father. And I didn't know it at the time, but I said, well, this happens. But I was really scared for him when I was a kid because there was uncertainty. And I go, Dad, is it okay? Are you doing all right? So those things, I think that was my moment that I can only look back on 10, 15 years later. I realized that by the time I was in my mid 20s, I wake up in the morning and go find a way to make a living. And, I'd call on all the stores. I'd be buying clearances and junkets, what have you. I actually started doing a lot of clearances in Canada and then US in health and beauty care. And that's how I started really learning about brands that didn't take off.
yeah,
And yeah, some very good mentors in that space. So yeah, that was the aha moment that didn't come till 10 years later. I didn't realize it, but yeah, I go, oh, okay, well, you're used to it,
yeah.
I went to business school. And There's lots of guys that you'll notice that, well, I've got this business idea, I've got this, but they won't step on the edge of the diving board because there's
Yeah.
sharks out there. Is there sharks
Yeah.
in New Zealand?
Yep. There is. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I guess people want to feel safe, and our brains are designed that way to keep us safe, right? So we tend to not go into territory that's going to be fearful for us, and so people tend to stay safe as possible. Now, in this current environment, in this day and age we're living in, a lot of people are starting to get made redundant. A lot of people are losing their jobs, and finding work is becoming quite a bit of a mission for people, to the point where a few weeks ago was reading something in the paper where 2,500 people went for one role, were applying for one job.
Well,
2,500 people. So I want to touch on a little bit about what you talked about before around AI and the universal basic income. Tell us what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I'll go into a tirade here for about 3 minutes. Don't worry, it won't be the huge constitutional speech and so forth. My father gave me much better lectures, right? And his were all free, right? But we are going to see. I'm going to give you examples in accounting right now. You can give me a box full of all your receipts, and I can run them through my scanner and come up with a set of balance sheets and income statements. Okay. Let's say you and I are partners, and we have another partner called George, and we think George is scoffing off us. We can take the general ledgers and we want an outside editor in the old days. Well, you can run that through your AI system and say, is there any accounting irregularities? One. So it's taking care of that. It's taking care of on AI. You're getting tax advice. I still have a good CPA if I need that.
Hmm.
So I gave you one example. I'm going to give you a second example. I'm going to give you a third one. I'm going off the top of my head. They have junior lawyers. They'd prepare a lawsuit or whatever, their legal thing, 40 hours at billing. They get paid $30 an hour. They get billed out at 250. Then the senior lawyer, he or she signs off on it, massages it out and says, Anthony, you got to clean up a couple things. Come back to me, kid, stuff like that. So the work of junior lawyers is getting replaced by AI. It's not just my opinion. I've read about this.
Mm.
And so how do we bring up our junior lawyers to the next stage? We go, okay, that's two of them gone. Where you can get efficiencies, I'm an engineer, I'm a mechanical engineer, and I want to do tensile strength. We used to calculate all that out in the old days. So you can find tensile strength. And I go, well, what if I turn around and I'm going to program my CNC machine? I'm going to use this carbide with this particular coolant and water system. I used to do this. My dad was like, anyways, I learned discipline through him. And, or so I hope. And so it'll tell you what carbide tool you can use with what liquid, what are the
Hmm.
metallurgic properties. So these are efficiencies uh, that you have. I'm going to give you another. You're an educator. What's going to happen when AI is at 225 IQ and it knows more than your teacher? Okay.
Mm.
It knows more than your professor. And I go, listen, I remember this happened to me. I taught corporate finance, but I remember in December, in the weekends, I'd come home. I got to do my math preparation. This is in high school. And my dad couldn't help me after a certain level. And I'm trying to work a calculus thing or some math equation. And I'm on that one darn equation for 4, 5, 6 hours. Monday morning, I'd go to my math teacher and she would say, okay, this is how you do it, Joe. And the other kids were lost to it. She'd run the whole equation down and so forth. And okay, I think I got it. What if I could, instead of, I'm not cheating here, I go, I can't figure out this equation. I can't do these journal entries on my accounting and finance. Can you please run me through how to do that particular equation on regression analysis or statistical? So it does that. I gave you 3 examples. So what's going to happen when your kid comes home and says, you know what, my teacher's a dummy. I got my AI and it's doing 200. It's an avatar. It's really cool looking and it's hip and it tells great jokes. Right now, AI doesn't tell great jokes. I had arguments with Chat, Gemini. Like I just go like, I told Chat that your jokes are really gimpy. We had that word when I was growing, like a real gimp. You're just like, you tell jokes like a blockhead. Right. And when I asked it to look at a couple of chapters or parts of my chapters in my book, it tried to sanitize it. Right. And so I did have some arguments with Chat, and it's better to keep your arguments with Chat instead of your spouse. It'll
Yeah.
do better.
Have you tried telling it to be a bit more, a bit more funnier and
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah, it can
as
help you write some blurb. Yeah, it can
yeah,
help you.
yeah,
You got to polish it out though. It's still a bit. And when it looks at your book, it tried to sanitize it, and I don't trust it yet for grammaticals to be perfect because then it starts changing the structure of your sentences.
yeah,
And in my writing styles, I try to be eloquent, but then I put some crusty stuff to make people think about things like
yeah,
that. You know.
yeah.
Anyways,
Now, now, I also heard,
UBI. We're going to go to that. We're going to go.
yeah,
Go ahead. We're going to go to UBI.
we'll come to that. I also heard recently that the entry level jobs for kids coming out of school are disappearing. And so, what does that mean for kids that are leaving school if the entry level jobs are not there? How do they get into the workforce? And then we'll go and then if you could talk a little bit about the UBI.
Getting into the workforce, they're going to have to be very entrepreneurial, right? A lot of them
Mm,
go, like a lot of them are going, I'm going to be a social media influencer. That's like trying to be I'm not knocking it. I think this generation of the Zers, if you will. They're very entrepreneurial, more so than I'm a boomer, so they're not as entrepreneurial. We were taught corporate job, you get the thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. So they're going to have intrinsic skills. They're going to have to reconcile social media with algorithms and of course AI. So I think there's no perfect answer to that because right now, I talk to a lot of kids coming into university or they go, I'm getting gaslighted. They're not stupid. They know they're getting gaslighted, right? Look, I love philosophy and history, but right now, if I lived my life over again, I would not go to university unless I'm going to study STEM, right? This is what I have to say to them. You can take a lot of courses on Coursera, take courses where you can really prompt engineer. You don't have to be a computer IT guru. You can take courses there. You can take data management algorithmic courses on there. You can go to MIT Openware and you can start learning about machine learning mathematics. I learned from a friend of mine, and he says, if you want to get good at something, Joe, and I go, yeah, work on your weakest areas. Work on your weakest areas, right? I mean, may it be a pro athlete, like I'm partial because I'm Canadian, watch hockey. You've got to be able to play at both ends of the ice if you're going to be a really good forward. Same goes with European football, right? With international football. So work on those areas. That's what I have to say about kids. So the whole story about what's going to happen in this travesty of tyranny with UBI, universal basic income. So what's going to happen here is we're going to get unemployment. They're going to cook the unemployment numbers just like they cook the inflation numbers, and it's not really 4 or 5%. It's much higher than that effective unemployment. People are working 2, 3 jobs. So we're not even talking about industrial robots here. We're not even talking about robots that can turn around and brick the side of a house. We're just about there, right? So they're going to I'm not saying they'll replace a plumber or electrician, but they can do a lot of bricklaying perfectly. So you're going to get maybe 25 to 30% unemployment. The plebeians will stand up and go, oh, my dear, what's the government going to do? You're calling the government is, because when we depend on government so much, it's such a form of self-inflicted abuse. I don't mean to say government, of course, has a role. There are streets, fair play, rules of commerce, putting, sinister people, away. I get that part, protection of your land. I get those things, but communities do much better. So what's going to happen is people will reach out to the government. You see it doing it with recession. You know how they acted during the strong flu a few years ago. It was really weakened. Our grandfathers, great grandfathers, our grandmothers would have not acted like that. They would have put on their shoes. I got a job to go to. So what's going to happen is they're going to reach out to government and they're going to say, we've got mass unemployment. And that's where you're going to fall into their trap. Reaching out to government is like getting the carjacker to run your valet service in your 5-star hotel. That's what it basically is. And so when they do that, they're going to turn around and say, how am I going to live? I got to make a living, right? So I'll give them universal basic income. I will turn around at election time and tell them, it's those big corporations in Silicon Valley and Bangalore and those ones in so on and so forth, international. They're the ones that are really screwing you. And we're going to tax them heavy. So you get rid of small and medium businesses, not all, right? You got to keep a few dangling examples. You get rid of businesses at large. The only ones that stay are the ones that large corporations can't even bother with. They're small, 3, 4, $2 million businesses. They'll survive at some level. The The large corporations will be vilified. These are the same ones that give your donor, the donor class. And you know which ones I'm talking about, all the all-star characters in Silicon Valley. And we will put people on universal basic income and they will follow the script. You've got your 15-minute cities. You basically will be told what you can buy, told what you can spend. AI will be so advanced. You went to the protest that I didn't agree with, so I might, have to bring down your UBI a little bit, and you'll follow the script. If I give you, look, you saw it during the heavy flu. I don't want to use the other COVID word. During the heavy flu, you saw it. Everybody stayed home. They go, what's
Mm,
the government going to do? They made a mess out of basically a strong flu. I mean, we're seeing it in retrospect. And if people don't believe it, what can I say? They should see their doctors and see if they're in a coma or something like that. And that's all I can say to them. So in essence, Anthony, they will then be dependent on governments, just like, a dog's dependent on their food from their masters. And every 4 years, they'll go, I have a choice. They'll let you out for an election, of course, because that's basically falling for the inebriated concept and it's basically the seduction of believing you've actually got a choice, right? You really don't. And so you're going to go from one, it's going to be tyranny. It's fantastic. I can digitally control your bank accounts, where you go, what you do, who you vote for. And you don't want to mess with me because if I freeze your account, you can't even buy food, right? Because there's no
that's true.
cash. Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
cash because you remember the war on crime? Yeah. Well, we got to, there's money laundering, there's crime. We have to use digital money only, right? Well, criminals should know about criminals. But anyways, so I see that kind of a world. You're going to see dependency. There's going to be a shift. And if you don't believe me that people will reach out for a government, look at every recession. And it's in my practical MBA book since FDR. um, President Harding in America would not get involved in 1921, not the 1929 depression, 1920 depression. He let the market work itself through. In 18 months, it was over. Employment came back. They will turn around. How are you going to solve inflation? Nixon couldn't do it. Johnson couldn't do it. Reagan couldn't do it. Uh, and how are you going to resolve unemployment? And again, these are issues that are people are used to going out to government. And the reason you're getting these deeper and deeper and deeper recessions, Anthony, is because government bloated. Even they made a bigger mess out of the last recession,
Yeah.
and then the whole baby collapses. So yeah. Anyways, that was my long and winding speech.
So UBI is starting to sound so much more like communism.
You won't listen. It doesn't matter if you're getting the money
Yeah.
and you saw it. Look, everybody was happy during the big flu.
Mm.
I stayed home
I never
and I
had it.
watched.
I never had it. No,
No, you didn't catch it. Okay.
I
And
didn't catch
I
it.
stayed home. I watched, Godzilla versus Bambi, or, I watched MMA fighting. I got my Netflix, I got step money. I got money in from the a government, and I'm good. I eat my popcorn, I eat my sandwiches. In Canada, you can't forget this. They closed all the most of the small stores, and they brought more people into all the Costco's, Loblaws, and some of the other big chains there. So in Canada, I remember going to a restaurant, and if you're not treated properly by the medical establishment, you have to sit outside. Well, as the weather got cold, you didn't go. So what happened is you got your dry run there. I don't mean it as a conspiracy. Saw, sir, like we've had a pretty good run for 400 or 500 years since the Renaissance in the West. And when you live that good, it can weaken you. So that's why and I say this in a very respectful way to everything. I come from a father and a mother who had hardship. That hardship I felt. I've had hardship. And to grow up in hardship is an incredible privilege.
Mm. Mm.
And I mean it in a very respectful way. It teaches you, you know what? I can fall off the railroad tracks and get back on. I can somehow,
Yeah.
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 Not everybody gets that.
It strengthens you. Hardship is a great thing for growth. You
Absolutely.
and I think more and more of us must live in that uncomfortable uncertainty because uncertainty is with us all the time. So now,
Yeah.
in a world with often pressures towards conformity, how can individuals effectively identify and then break free from the chains of normative expectation to find, truly find their unique path in life and their business.
So you're asking me, how do you want to get off that chain gang posing as freedom? Is that what you're saying? Because you're not in
Mm,
the big house, you're just on the chain gang, right?
mm,
And so in another way, you're asking me, how do you stop becoming firewood for society at large, maybe corporations or government? Because, leave it up to them. We are firewood. Being downtrodden, being in the underclass is an issue that's never been solved since the Romans. Marcus
mm,
Aurelius couldn't solve it, and certainly some of those tyrannical leaders in the Roman Empire couldn't. So the question then becomes, how do we move away from this, and how do you become? You need to. Let me put it to you this way: if your listeners are listening, I like certainty. I like okay. Let me give you some. I'm going to use some motivational words, hopefully. So you like your certainty, but now you've got the uncertainty of your corporate environment. There's no more 25, 40-year um, careers, or very rarely in
mm,
that sandbox. There's some exceptions. Ask yourself in the morning this question. I lived a life of certainty. And then when I became 50 or 45 or 55 or 60 years old, I look back and go, I'm uncertain about what I could have possibly become because I was magnetized to certainty. If I lived a life of uncertainty all my life and let's say I was self-employed or an entrepreneur, I can certainly say that I tried to do everything I possibly could. You need to consider what's better, to try and fail or to fail to try. And you will fail when you try some of these ventures. Some of your services won't work out. Some of your brands don't work out. But I think the genius or the litmus test of being an entrepreneur is, can you come up with, forget all the talk about your friends who, you hang out downtown and they get their steady paychecks, which is fine too. I'm not knocking that. Your corporation is not just counting the numbers. That's the easy part. Can you come up with a product or service that people will depart money with? And that, sir, is the final test of how well your company has a chance to get breathing room. Remember, look, you and I, all of us had incredible uncertainty. We're in our mother's stomach. We went through the birth canal. We came out of this world, and if there's born in a hospital, there's people touching you, doctors touching you, people crying, some laughing. Um, we could have got polio once upon a time. We could have got other diseases once upon a time. So you live with that uncertainty, right? You could have got ran over by a car. Like when I was growing up, there's no 911, there's no cell phones, there's all kinds of bad things could happen, right? You could be playing in the yard and some kid by accident or intentionally kicked you in the head and you're sitting there lying down and there's no phones or nothing. So there's some uncertainty there. You just
mm,
have to get climatized to it. Bad things can happen to really good people, right?
yeah.
But right now, the downside of all this technology, even when I went to the gym this morning, it's like they're on their cell phones. They're on their cell phones all day long. I use the word, they're living in the digital gulag, is what they're doing. They're on their, like, look, dude, the chief engineer at MIT is not calling you for the latest issues on the O-ring for the space shuttle or something. They're not calling you. They're not, the European Central Bank is not calling you on monetary policy, right? But they do this and yeah, they spend a lot of time. They can't read. They can't read books. And I'm not saying, try to be stuffy about this. When you read a physical book, it's not the same as a digital reading
Mm,
on digital. It penetrates. When you write, I love computers and technology. I'm around it all day. I sometimes put my phone in another room when I'm reading a book, and I'm reading one now on a brief history of Chinese civilization. Quite interesting stuff. Yeah.
mm,
And again, it doesn't matter which civilization you look at. There is never a shortage. There's never a shortage of tyrants. If you put an ad on Indeed, tyrants required. And if you put another ad for the incompetent, please apply here. You'll get gazillion. You'll get 3 billion people at least applying, right? So yeah, there you go.
yeah. Yeah.
I hope
Now,
I'm being nice.
yeah, you are. Yeah, absolutely. Now, Joe, for a small business owner who's navigating this competitive market, the uncertainty and so on, what's one tangible guerrilla tactic that they could implement today to challenge that status quo and stand out?
From getting their product to market.
Hmm.
Well, if you're not able to, like I deal with buyers, right? I'll give you another one. First of all, one guerrilla tactic is if you're not getting a response, clean your subject lines. Don't make them blasé. You know what, Anthony, I'm just coming off. I have a strategy that's going to change your life. Go ahead, right? If you're not able to, and they still won't respond, why don't you, if you have nice handwriting, or try getting it, because I took some calligraphy when I was a kid. You know why I took calligraphy, right? I said, well, I bought a calligraphy set because it says if you know calligraphy, you're gonna pick up more girls, you're gonna meet more girls. But that was my, I don't know if it helped me, yeah, and that got me in a lot of trouble. And we won't go there. Why don't you write a beautiful handwritten letter, short and sweet, just authentic, and outside put personal, confidential, Anthony. I'd really like to be on your show, Anthony, and I just don't know how to better communicate with you because I think my new pudding recipe could really help, so on and so forth. Just get down really, really interesting. When I did my book signing, it was last week, and I sent out all my newsletter and my WhatsApp and my IG, and I turned around and say, "Oh, please come to my book signing." No, the stars are coming out for this one. You don't want to miss it, right? It's just at a cafe. It was really nice. You just come up with something like that. I did one pitch to a retailer, and I turned around and I said something like to the effect, and she did crack up. I said, you know what? Once you put my brands on your shelf, it's going to be shaking like Shakira. It's going to be sliding. It's going to be sliding like Bruno Mars, right? It's going to hit the right tunes like Lady Gaga, so they go on and on. So I just write stuff. I do write stuff like that all the time. And if I don't get a knock on the door that they're going to commit me in an asylum, it can work. So these are because you probably have a good product that's, if you have a good product that's going to go, don't fall in love with your products. Let your customers fall in love with them. Test it out on Amazon. I'm giving an example. Test it on Amazon. Set up your Amazon store. Test out your product there, right? You can also test products on IG. You can also today I can make 3Ds. If you go on AI, you can make 3D pictures, conceptuals of all that, right? Test your products, um, not only in stores where people would purchase them, right? Maybe you've got this great cell phone that's going to blow the Apple 17 off the shelf, right? You want to make people want. You are selling when it comes to products, even service, you're selling emotions. You're selling. I've been in cosmetics all my life. I'm selling emotions. You
Mm,
know, just here's your hope, and guess what? Yeah, yeah. Don't worry, you're going to get change later. Just buy the product now. You'll get your change later. But you're selling. Why did someone buy a high-end series BMW?
it's emotion behind it. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
$35 bottles of shampoo. Oh, I need it for my hair. I
Yeah.
need it. It's got to be Redken or Schwarzkopf or some of the other brands. Anyways, I know you're going to ask me something.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay. So your work often highlights the soul of the brand. In your experience with brands Fifth Avenue and your extensive background, what truly defines the soul of a brand, and how does that soul translate into tangible meaning and value for consumers today in this fast-paced market that we have?
Okay. What do I mean by the soul of the brand? Well, we could look at, the classical category manager or brand manager will look at, the architecture, the color sequences. I'm going to give you examples. I think it's better. I think brands talk, they say things. And I'll go into more traditional, like a 75-year-old brand that you will not knock off the shelf. And that's Tide laundry detergent. It was done in the early 1950s, 52. It came out, or I think in 49, first synthetic laundry detergent. It's in my book. No one's been able to knock it off. The color orange is associated with Tide. If you emulate that color orange, you're going to get a truckload of legal papers from their attorneys. The product is safe, trustworthy. I can propagate that to my children and my children's children to their children, and it works. In our house, from my mom, maybe my wife, my dad, Tide. My dad came home dirty, right? I was in an industrial environment. So did I at that time. So that's a trust brand. Okay. And I'm going to go to cars in a moment, but I want to go to Apple. I moved from Tide. So I don't like to get stuck on, well, I only know CPG because I love technology, right? Because I was I was fired at least 45 times by my dad, maybe 50 or 100 times. But I used to program industrial manufacturing machines a long time ago. They're called CNCs. They're easy to do now. They're a nightmare then with tapes. Consider the iPhone 16, 17. What did Jobs do? Jobs did not move the technology forward, Steve Jobs. What he borrowed a page, in my opinion, from not Henry Ford, but JP Sloan and Harley Earl. I'm going to tie that in. I have an Apple, beautiful white minimalist design. I have a great camera. Look who I am. You're just, Anthony, you don't have the Apple 17. You're just not as cool as me. That's what I'm telling you. And that's the soul of the brand. That was the genius of Steve Jobs. Henry Ford, you can buy any color car you want as long as it's black. And then Sloan turned around with the help of Harley Earl, and they came up with the concept of marketing segmentation, which meant a different car for every purse. That's all they said. And the birth of marketing segmentation is probably in the late 20s, early 30s. And Harley Earl, if you don't know who I'm talking about, he is the man who basically was arguably the greatest industrial designer, where he made Cadillacs beautiful, Buicks look beautiful. When I was a little kid, if your dad bought an Oldsmobile, oh, jeez, you're just, look. I see my dad's friend. We have an Oldsmobile. Look who we are. Now I'm going way back now. Now, of course, Maserati, Mercedes, so on and so forth. So these are souls of the brand, right? Why did I buy a Maserati? Because I know how to drive at 220 kilometers an hour. No. Look, I've arrived. Nobody's believing me. I'm successful. Look at my car. And if you buy, I don't do that, but where I live, there's a lot of nice cars. And some of them are really large homes, and they have nice Range Rovers, Mercedeses, and now eventually the bailiff cometh, and those are gone. The homes have dropped 35% because we're having a real estate crash in Canada, especially in Ontario and British Columbia. The car's gone. The bank took back the house. Maybe the spouse will go, you know what? I'm not going through this. I'm just going to call a good divorce lawyer and get through this thing here. It might be a bit better outcome for me. But in all reasonableness, I gave you two examples. So, what does BMW traditionally mean? The ultimate driving machine. VW, drivers want it, right?
Mm.
And finally, the one that I can think of is, now you're saying Mercedes is high end, BMW's high end, Maserati's high end. These are nice, nice cars. But I keep watching BYD Motors in China.
Mm.
They've got $1,000 car I saw this morning, all US figures, 43,000. It's 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds. It'll blow a Porsche right out the door. They've mastered the handling technology of automobiles. And it's an EV car. And now China's become the largest exporter of the world. So if I have, and I'm pronouncing this right, if I have a Huawei phone 5 years ago, who are you? Right now, I'm okay. I'm cool. I bought my new Lenovo. Hopefully, if you have me on your show again, I got my new Lenovo laptop with the 9,000K camera and so forth. And I'm exaggerating here. That was, even though that was old IBM brand, but Lenovo's just got the same prestige as HP or Dell. It's all in the same league there. And as an offshoot, I feel bad that IBM sold the Lenovo brand to China, because it was such a great connection to the consumer. So in the brand, maybe a shampoo, if you get a woman hooked onto your shampoo, she will, you can't touch that. Her hairstyling products, you can't touch. I'll give you an example of a guy. I used to do shave creams in Canada. I did a big American brand called Barbasol. Guys don't talk about, guys don't go shopping in the store and go, oh, let's look at this shirt and that shirt. They don't do that. But when you start talking about the experience of shaving for a man, and because I watched my dad shave with Gillette, I got to buy Gillette too. That moment where my dad was shaving, I go, Paul, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Right? What do you think about the last episode of Batman? Is he going to get the Riddler, you think? And my dad's laughing and stuff. But those moments that you had between the propagation of knowledge between the father and son, and there was shave cream involved, that's indelible. You can't shift me. You can't shift off. I used to do razor blades for shaving blades, right? Very hard to switch a consumer on that, right? Because if you take a no-name brand and I'm gonna be on Anthony Dahya's show, and next thing you know, I nicked my face and I got nicks and so forth, and they go, "What did you do, Joe? What kind of an individual are you? You got nicks and bruises on your face. Who am I interviewing here?" Anthony might cut the interview short. But seriously though, if I'm going out to see friends or to an evening or a gala or whatever, I don't get invited to many friends' houses. Don't worry. But seriously, and if I nick myself, because I bought a cheaper razor blade, I'm not prepared to take that risk. In the same sense that I'm not prepared to take the risk of not having Tide, right? And I'm not prepared to take the risk of not having an Apple phone because I might be looked down upon with all my peers at college and high school and what have you, right? So that's what brands do. They sell feelings, they reduce risk, they have their beautiful industrial designs. That's what made the Corvette. Harley Earl was, the father of the Corvette in the 1950s. And I've studied him intensively. So, in the golden age of American automakers, that's what they were selling. Cadillac was a Cadillac, but they killed it themselves, yeah, I know.
Yeah. Thank you. That was brilliant. Love that. Okay. So in this era where authenticity is paramount, how does understanding and nurturing the soul brand help businesses connect more deeply with their audience, just beyond sort of marketing tactics?
Well, first of all, if we turn back even the clock, not 20 years ago, but 10, 15 years ago, we had, and I did put this in my book, but I'm thinking about it now. We had, what's the right word? We had basically discussions with consumers. Why do you particularly like this particular mouse? Right? Why do you like this mouse, or why do you like this product, brand A over brand B and brand C? And we're trying to get latent manifest variables. In other words, that's a fancy word for what's going on in your mind. Because when you're buying a brand, you don't always know why. It's that one fragrance, the look of the bottle, right? The look of the particular suitcase, whatever you're buying. So you now have the ability to get feedback by IG, right? Because people go, I'm going to tell you, you want my opinion, right? And it's good. I'm going to step back. They were called focus groups. That's what we had. They had people behind the mirror. If somebody really is studying communications and they don't, or they're studying marketing, go watch the complete series of Mad Men from the 1960 to
Hmm.
1971, right?
Hmm.
And you want to talk about the soul of a brand and capturing when Don Draper came out, he played Don Draper was the guy, right? And they're talking about the Kodomatic was a carousel that showed your pictures on the screen and all that. You've got memories, tears come, when you see memories that are pictures that are 10, 20 years old. So I think the connection to the consumer on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, we didn't have that connection and feedback. We are getting, the focus groups have gone the way of the Watusi twist, right? Um, we are getting connections from there. And if you have those connections with your brand and they trust you, and go to a restaurant. I guarantee you go to a restaurant, you're looking at ratings for sure. If you don't know the place, I look at the ratings 4.7, 4.2. If it's 3.9, it's fine. You get some outlier who sits there and trashes the restaurant because, that's their, but it's a good restaurant. The other people like it. Some people, you got to watch consumers. Some of them are very authentic. They go, I like this, but I don't like that. You get some balanced people. Some of them are there to, I've had professional trashers come on my Amazon site, right? They're pros, but some of them just get nasty because maybe they're mad at life. And maybe, you know what? If I ruin you, I'm somebody now. Got to be careful.
Mm.
Social media is everything out there. But when I get some beautiful emails from consumers saying, I love my daughter uses your shampoo when she goes swimming, right? Where can I buy it in Alberta or somewhere north of Alaska or something? At one point, I had my shampoo brands in the Arctic where the people there actually used them.
Mm.
And that was really cool because I had a friend of mine who's a car reviewer and he went to the Arctic and he's like got a thing about shampoos and stuff. And he showed a picture of it in the Arctic in one of the small corner stores there, like, way up in North Canada could get cold.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. So yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Hope that kind of answers your question.
It does, it does. And now with the rise of AI, how can businesses ensure that the soul of their brand isn't diluted or lost in the pursuit of efficiency and artificial intelligence driven strategies? So how can we stay, keep that soul brand in the AI space right now?
Well, if you're in the product, you still got to. If you're in software, you've got some pretty tough competition, right? Like if you're in software, if you want to, you plug in to the AI all your actual sales, and it creates the regression analysis model, complex one that forecasts it for you. That's going to be a bit tougher. But if in your products, what you want to do is, if you're dealing in products versus the service, you want to send a message that it's grounded, it's physical, it's grounded. Do you remember the real world? Yeah, that's where we're from. We're real humans. And so you want to give that human touch. You've got that grounded touch. AI doesn't change your formulations, right? AI will not change how you feel about the iPhone 17. And I'm probably missing a skew of brands here. I'm looking around and I'm thinking, what do I have in my household? Doesn't change that. AI is not going to change. Why did I buy that Tesla? Because first of all, I'm really cool, one, and I'm more virtuous than you, two. That's why I bought the Tesla 3, right? I'm more virtuous. Um, you're mucking up the environment, and I'm not. Plus, I'm looking cool. And and I know you got BMW, Anthony, but you're old cool. I'm new cool. And so keeping it grounded, I think there's nothing better than true authenticity. Cool the propaganda, seduce them with being authentic, seduce them by bringing almost tears to their eyes. When they think about it, that's what they were doing when I had the Barbasol brand. Like men would just almost be tearful about it. Like, it just evoked memories.
Mm,
You want to evoke memories. I won't get into it now, but we had a phenomenal ad agency came in and they did a phenomenal, but we never launched it. But you want to evoke memories. If you have a brand, you can, give you an example. It just came to my head right now. Let's say Apple lost 3% market share, right? So then all of a sudden I create a beautiful collage, a 20-second commercial, 20, because you put up on TikTok too. But nobody under 700 years old watches television anymore. I mean, you can get your propaganda elsewhere. Anyways, I'll give you an example. I'm going on top of my head. Maybe your viewers will like it. Uh, you show pictures of Jobs because he was friends with Bill Gates. You show Jobs. You show the Macintosh computer. You show the very first iPhone. Then they had their musical thing too, right? You start showing all the black and whites turning into colors. And we come from a time and place that we've been part of your lives since 1976. And you just bring those memories one by one, slides,
mm.
pictures, people, touching their new phone. Tomorrow I'm getting by the way, and I'm getting my new laptop, right? I'm just like, that's the only thing guys can talk. We don't even understand what's in an engine anymore. We just open up the compartments and it's too complex.
I loved it when because I had an HP for the last 3 years, and I sold my house, and I said, okay, I've got money. I'm going to go and first thing I'm going to buy is a new Apple MacBook Pro. And I tell you what, my
You love
life
it.
is love it. Life is great. I'm still on the 13, not on the
Yeah.
17 yet. But oof, but for me, the most important thing was actually having a really
Yeah.
good laptop, right? Do that I can use to create these podcasts and so on.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
if you're only on the 16, not on the 17, I'm going to have to unfriend you on
I'm on the
Instagram. I'm sorry,
13.
Anthony.
I'm on the
Oh, are you? Oh,
13.
no, we can't be friends on Instagram. I'm going to No, I went I went to my book signing. I tell some jokes here. I told these teenage kids and these guys and these girls, I go, yeah, I just unfriended my wife on Instagram. She's got not even 240 followers. Go away, Like we're having fun. But no, you're right. And if I came up to you and your Mac computer and you're a very affable, very diplomatic individual, and if I started calling your Mac computer names, right? You can work. How dare you call me? No, I'm not talking about you. I go any day, Anthony, or I tell a bunch of Mac users, right? And I said, PC's better. This is better. And, we're going to argue, not in a mean way, right? But once upon a time, I'm not a motorcyclist. The President Harley Davidson had such brand loyalty, said, who else will tattoo my brand name on their shoulder or their arm? The brand loyalty of Apple, really, really hard to supersede that.
Mm,
That
yeah,
loyalty, the design, the feel,
the
the
quality.
heritage. I think Apple took Harley Earl. Steve Jobs was the Harley Earl of the technology in terms of he made it so cool. But again, I go back to that commercial I came up with. Just go back, evoke the memories of like in my book, I talk about Jobs,
Mm,
Gates, the whole works, and evoke those memories of that. Some of the Macintoshes failed for whatever reason, they're pioneering, but you go through all those computers and we were there for you at all those times, and you might have been in the 90s and, might have been, either just in high school or 21 or you're in college and you're still awkward and stuff like that. We're there. And that's who we are. And when you evoke memories like that, it's good. You could do that in the automotive industry, but that's a bit different. I have friends in the automotive industry. And in Canada and the United States, I can't speak from where you are. The US car companies have given up on four-door sedans, or for the most part. They've thrown it all under the bus. Well, why? The market's towards SUVs, and I'll just make SUVs. I make more money. And if I make SUVs, I meet my targets, I get my bonus. The shares go up.
yeah, I've got an SUV and I love it. I've got a I've got a Mazda CX-5 and I love it. Like for me, Mazda's has always been my go-to car.
They're a great car. Have you
Yeah,
ever driven a Mazda rotary? That was my first
no,
rotary engine was in the
no,
Mazda.
no,
Really smooth engine.
no.
Yeah, yeah.
I got this one in 2020, in July 2020, and I just love it. It's like I guess it was the beginning of autonomous cars where you can set the radar cruise control in front of to a distance of you, and you don't even have to. I just take my foot off the accelerator, the brake, and everything, and it drives itself.
Wow.
Just love it.
They're good.
Just
They're good cars.
yeah,
I'm old enough to remember, or at least I'm old enough to write about how the Americans car companies self-inflicted and destroyed the prestige of so many of their cars, how they ignored the Japanese. Nissan was Datsun back then.
hmm
Toyota was Toyota. A lot of people come up to them and say, I love a Honda Civic. I mean, it's a bulletproof car. I asked you, do you know what a Honda Civic was emulated against? Most people don't know, and I don't mean it in a disrespectful way. It was basically the Japanese version of the Austin Mini.
yes,
And Austin Mini was considered one of the top three most influential car designs of the last century. And they made it for maybe even more reliable and lower price and so on. But the American quality engineers in the 1950s would go to Japan and laugh at them, right? And they never studied Japan's industrial history. When the OPEC crisis hit in the early 1970s, and everyone went small cars, and the Americans had these big flotillas, right? These large, large cars. That's how they grabbed I bought my first American brand new car, I remember, and the motor was just like shaking like this. And the dealer says, well, drive it for 2 weeks, come back, write down what's wrong. We'll kind of make the adjustments. You don't deliver cars like that anymore. You can't get away with it. That's because of the Japanese. Incidentally, China is now the largest exporter of automobiles in the world.
mm,
They
yeah,
overtook the Japanese, but Japan still has a fair bit of industrial might,
yeah.
America's is diminishing. That's a different
Although
story.
although Tesla's going to be, I mean, it's getting up there. I mean, and the vision that Elon Musk has, and we were talking about, like, one of the things that Elon said is that going back to AI, he was saying that that in 10 to 15 years, working will be optional. Going to a
Yes,
job will be optional, and also he talked about how robotics, humanoid robots, and Teslas are going to be there's going to be way, way more, and because they've got those giga presses that can produce a car in 5 seconds, so which is just
you're
mind
right.
blowing because they no longer put together as separate components; they're actually casted, right? So
Wow.
yeah, so it's interesting. Now let's go back to your book, The Practical MBA on Economics. You delve into what businesses or what business school often misses. From your unique perspective, what are some of the most critical economic realities or principles that entrepreneurs in particular need to grasp that aren't typically covered in the traditional education system?
I'm going to answer that question about that. I want to go back to what you just said about AI and Elon Musk, because I do listen to a fair bit of his stuff. What about in 10, 15, 20, 25 years? What if future generation turns around and says, those who employed people in physical labor were abusers? They abuse you physically. And AI is our last great hope. It's the modern version of Marcus Aurelius. It's the second coming of John F. Kennedy. I just thought about that. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying it's worth considering. Now, answering your question about what is what do business schools miss in teaching economics? In the book, I didn't cut up business schools. I didn't, because obviously I went to business school and I studied economics. I taught corporate finance. I never taught economics. What they miss is, first of all, they didn't warn us about the concept of printing money, where it really doesn't have the value. Nobody in business school turned around and said, okay, if I'm going to print $500 billion every month or $1 trillion a year, I want to look at my industrial and technological GDP or productivity. Does that come up at the same level? Have I produced more competent workforce? Is the quality and quantity of my workforce better? Okay, I can print more money. It didn't teach us the dangers of allowing unsound money in the hands of the political class. Basically, what can I tell you? I can't remember everything, but if you can print money and you're in the political class, it didn't teach you this, and it's in my book. To stay in power, what do you need? You need a monopoly over anything passing off as education today. And then you need a monopoly over propaganda. That's all you need. Seduction and education, what's the difference? And so you can print money. And of course, you have more money for wars and other things that we should be participating in. So that's the first thing it didn't teach you. It did teach you the dangers of the fractional banking system, where right now you can almost put 0% backstop. You can put 0% as extra money in the banks. I did not know, and it did not properly teach how banks create money from zero. Right? It didn't create. They actually create money. For example, if I used to think okay, so I need a mortgage for $500,000, and someone like Anthony's got 500,000 in the bank. I borrow that. They put it against my house. I put down $1,000. I owe 500, and Anthony's money is safe, right? They can always look. They actually created, and they didn't have 500,000. They just created $500,000 as a debit, and they credited me, and therefore they created money. As I pay the interest, that goes into their income statements. I pay it down, and so those were some of the things. They did not teach me in business school that the particular, and I didn't, I'm not knocking the school. I didn't sit there. I know how to do it. Those profs. It was not one of those books. It was just a book that if you really want to know how the banking systems work, they didn't really teach me in my economics and finance courses a history of all the stock market crashes, why they happened, what was the remedy, what did we learn from it. They didn't teach me the anatomy of the bubble. That's another one. But the one they didn't teach me, because it's blasphemous to somehow, the father of socialism as we know it in the United States, and he read the Planned Society, and many did, is really no other than FDR. And I don't, socialism has its upsides too. I get that part. I'm not an ideologue. But if you wanted to write a thesis on colossal travesty, complete incompetence, read Murray Rothbard and really study in detail the history, the economic history of the Great Depression and what Hoover did, who was a hardline interventionist in the free markets, and what FDR did, including the Industrial Recovery Act. What he did at one point in the Industrial Recovery Act is, I would say, you know what? No more cutthroat competition. I want all these businesses to make money. You'd put a blue shield. And what they did is, I would let you make money, okay? And as a result of this, the economy became healthy. What happened is prices went up, consumers could afford less, they were bust already, and the economy contracted. The other thing that FDR did that was not in my, when went to business school, is women were getting into the workforce, not like today, but back then relatively. What he did is he encouraged, and I don't mean this in a sexist way, he's just trying to get the numbers up. He encouraged women to stay home to bring down unemployment numbers. Employment in the Great Depression, and they made it great by messing with it in 1929,
mm,
30. It was a deep recession, turned into a depression. Went from 7, 11, 15, 21, 22. By the time the Americans got involved in the war just before Pearl Harbor, it was at about 14%. It went down to 2% because they went into the war. No other reason, no other, oh, FDR saved the economy. Come on, these are politicians. Most of them couldn't run a hot dog stand, and sustain it for more than 4 days. Please. When I was younger, I believed in things like that. What I like about the youth, the ones I talk to, not the ones that I see on IG, I should be scrolling at my age. They know they're being scammed. They know they're being used as firewood. And that's why, considering all the skills that an entrepreneur would have to have, despite it themselves, it'll come in handy. Just thinking like that. Even if you're working in a corporation, you want to be really sharp at things. I wrote a whole chapter on negotiations, and throughout the book, I exercise in the book, weight and diplomacy and so on and so forth.
yeah,
Did that kind of answer? So those are some of the things without going
yeah,
into a long and winding thing. And then at the end of the book, I wrote the concept of the Kabbalatocracy. I came up with that term, the interwinding relationship between the military industrial complex, Hollywood, the media. Like, look, if you're watching television today, there's no need. Here's what I have to say about MSM now that you got me going, and it's in there too. Why don't you consolidate? Because I know how to bring down costs, right? Consolidate your costs and basically, why don't you just broadcast from all the international intelligence services? Because this is basically what you're mimicking, what you're saying, right? They're shameless. They're a well-rehearsed tapestry of lies. And so that's what I kind of got at the end of the book. Inflation, by the way, Anthony, it's 2.9% CPI or 3.1%. It's really 9.5%, 10% inflation. I was reading stuff on that. They're measuring inflation. Give you one more thing that was in my practical MBA book. First of all, inflation is at 3%, officially the CPI. And this way, what they're going to do is they're going to print more money because they're going to say, we need to stimulate the economy. Yeah. You want to stimulate the economy? Reduce government 85 to 90%. Get
mm-hmm,
these people in government to have productive employment somewhere else. And it's not going to happen because if you reduce them even 20%, the old ladies will come at you with canes and stuff like that. Everybody will.
yeah,
So in the time of Paul Volcker, during the time, I think Reagan, even during the time of Clinton, in that era, inflation was measured differently. Based on those measurements, I'll give you one example. You can go to shadow statistics. Inflation is at about 9.5%, 10%. You know it. You're buying kiwis. I bought watermelon. I'm buying fruits. So what they do is they have substitution. Beef prices went up. We brought in chicken. So now we measure chicken inflation, not beef, out. But the best one is this. Car prices have gone through the roof. Wait till BYD comes in, they'll straighten it up. The free markets are beautiful. And no matter how much not perfect, but consider this one. And this one I read in a book. You've got what they call hedonic adjustment. Your car prices are not going up, Anthony. The Mazda that you bought, the C one that you bought that was 30,000 American dollars before is now 49,000. That's because the new ones have ABS on them. That's
mm,
because the new one has all the interconnectivity so you can talk to the cosmos and the gods, right? And the new one has, a better airbag in it. These are technological furtherances. That's not inflation. That's out of my CPI. So it's a good scam. But the idea is, the official line is, let's keep inflation low. The official line of the Kabbalatocracy, let's keep it low so we can print some more money. So they elect us so we can destroy the country more. It doesn't matter who they elect. It won't matter. It's
mm,
basically, and at election time, we can give out freebies, And I was telling you during that massive flu that we had, they shut everything down except the liquor stores.
mm,
Yeah, they're all, well, that's okay. You need to know, Anthony, if you're buying liquor, wine, beer, you can't catch the flu. Possible. So I know how to tell you. But those are some of the practical things I taught. I wrote it in a way that's, I was more eloquent in the way that I wrote it. But there's some good one-liners in there. As long as you have these large governments, these problems will continue. There's no way to get rid of them because If you try and get rid of these large governments and tell people like, listen, you need to, Socrates went through this too. You need to be a bit more thinking before you vote. I'm getting freebies. I'm happy, right? I'm on heroin. And you're calling the heroin dealer to clean me up? I hate the guy. But, I can't figure that maybe in 3 weeks after they strap me and clean me up and I'm no longer getting the shakes and I'm clean and I got my senses. No, no, no. Just keep jabbing me with some more. And that's what they're like. And Socrates called it. What did Plato? I'm going to read the book of the Republic before I die. And Plato turned around and he called democracy the beginning of the end of what was once a great civilization. I don't know. He said that.
Yeah.
Anyways, I don't know how we went there.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of one-liners and stuff in my book. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go back to AI for a bit. So your books, including the upcoming Guerrilla Guide, mention leveraging AI for competitive advantage. For an entrepreneur who perhaps just is starting to explore AI, or business owners, where should they even begin effectively to integrate it into their brand building, or building a business strategy that without actually feeling kind of like overwhelmed?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of examples where I use it, just hands-on. First of all, in your ERP systems, in your software systems, you should have more AI integrated. The second is, if you're designing a brand, you can give it a look and say, give me some feedback for what you think, right? Third of all, I'll give you examples. And I'm not going to get into, you can integrate it. This would be a deep conversation. The third of all, I said this to a buyer when I went and called on her. I can turn around in a department store. In the old days, we'd write down, prices, and then the security would be called. They'd toss us out the door like a bunch of drunks in a New Orleans bar, right? We went. And then, I would dictate them and then bring them back to my administrative assistant, and they would type out all the prices on the last 20 SKUs. I'm going to give you an example. I could take a panoramic picture of the shelf at Walmart. I use Walmart. I know you've got other Metro and some of the other big ones in Europe and so forth. So I would go to major department store and I want to look at all the laundry detergents I could take a picture of all the shampoo and hair care products. I could take that and tell ChatGPT, can you please put this on an Excel with pricing, number of SKUs, facings, how many facings do I have of extra body shampoo or Pantene or whatever, and can you summarize this on an Excel sheet? This would take me the better part of the day. It's done in 1 minute, and I massage it for a day or two. You can use AI for competitive advantage because you can do it in other ways, like your engineering team can run by some of its designs. How would this stand up against our premise of thinking this building might sway too much? It's got a 1 degree this way, 1 degree. What would happen if you had 70-kilometer winds, 80, 90, 100, 110? So you could do litmus tests with engineering. I'll give you another example. In the old days, we'd send them out to get HR tests. It would be a lot of money, right? So what I can do now is I can run Excel, Word, PowerPoint, counting HR tests. I can run that in AI as well. I can also, I'll give you, this is probably one of the better ones. You can start pitching, if you like. Let's say I'm working on something where in my CPG business, where I can send basically a standard letter, the first one, and say, and I use my email. How you do not do this, and I'll show you how not to do it, is you pitch and you say, listen, I have some fantastic brands in phones or whatever I'm doing, and I'd like to have an audience with you and meet you. Would you be able to? And then it'll give you second and third, uh, saying, I don't know if you read my email, but can I? And so you can do that in
Yeah.
sales.
I've
So it
done
could be your,
I've done that. I've built a lead intelligence platform that you can actually craft the initial email with the follow-up emails, and then it reminds you that, hey, you've got a follow-up email to send. So yeah, I've built that already.
and it's your own database, right? Of people in there.
No, I've
Who do you got to send it to somebody, right? I'm just asking.
yeah. So
Just find it interesting.
I'm doing a Google Maps scrape within a radius of an area.
Yeah.
I'm saying, for example, I want all electricians that I can reach out to, and then what it's doing is it's allowing me to look at their website and see where I can help them as an AI automation consultant, where they maybe they need a chatbot on their website, maybe they need an automated lead capture a process, or whatever it is. So it gives me that information, but it's using a number of different other third party platforms to be able to bring all this information and provide me the actual understanding of where I can help these clients. And it also then creates a personalized document, a PDF with the recommendations, and sends it to them.
So your pitch is created based on who they are.
Mhm.
Customized pitches for each person.
Mhm.
So I might have a plumbing business, I might have a flower business, I might have an electrical business
It,
where I'm an electrician.
it's actually it's looking at your website, it's looking at your LinkedIn profile, and it's doing a whole analysis on that particular. So it's not. It's actually unique to that particular lead, and
Can we
it's
talk after the show?
100%. Yeah.
It's really, I find, I mean, it's really incredible. I'm going to step backwards for just like, that's incredible. Writing emails after emails. I'm sure you use your email. You have a special email from that. And just my opinion. I'm not trying to kibosh it. I get these ones. I get about 1 million of them a year. Not I'm exaggerating. SEO, your website's really nice, but it's not, you can't find it on Google. My CPG website is not good. It's actually terrible. I got to update it, which I'm going to do. Which you can do websites right now on. You can just write most of the material. They'll just scrape it, like you said, and it's all done. I send it to my computer guy, puts it up for a few $100. What I don't like is these fake names they come up with. The names are too perfect. General Douglas MacArthur or something like that, and they come up with these names, and they're all Gmails and Hotmails, or mostly Gmails, and they're. In the old days, I would email them back, no response for 2 days, but they got the kid doing it or something like that. And then they got someone who knows what they're doing. I think they're all primarily SEOs. But what you're saying there is ingenious. There's so many other ways. I wrote my own book. The only maybe 3% of it, I used AI to get historical facts. I didn't know I'll give you an example. I didn't know all the acquisitions off the top of my head for Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook. But at the same time, AI was able to provide that. I quickly checked. If I did that with Google, I spent 4 or 5 hours figuring it out. It's quite interesting. I wrote about Zuckerberg in there, and I consider him, if James Brown was the godfather of soul, Zuckerberg was the godfather of the social media. Love him, hate him, that's a separate matter. I'm not there to
Yeah.
judge people. But
But
to me,
yeah, by the way, what I wanted to share with you also is that on the Champion Mindset Collective website, which is actually built with AI, it's using lovable AI. So it's vibe coding, and in the back end of the website, so you've seen it. There's a lot of automation in this, and I've actually
sure is, yeah.
built an ecosystem, and it's got an operating system called the Champion. Now, in the back end, I've actually got my AI, the lovable AI, to basically go through every single page of the website and be able to put keywords and information that AI crawlers can crawl. So crawlers like Googlebot, Bingbot, and all the different ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, all those can scrape it and take all that information back to the LLMs and be able to then suggest that Champion Mindset Collective is a good podcast to be on. Um, and
Wow.
and already each day when I go and check the page to see who's been crawling and so on, I can see which episodes are being crawled, which pages, articles are being crawled, and all that information is going back to the LLMs. The other thing I've done is also I want to know how many people are visiting a particular episode page on my website. And now I have that information because I can go, well, this episode here is tracking really high. So these are the things that I need to focus on because people seem to like this kind of episode. So I'm using AI in a way to give me information as to what are the topics that people are liking, where they're coming from. So are they coming from Facebook? Are they coming from LinkedIn? Because when I do a
Wow.
social media post after the episode's released, I want to know where the traffic is coming from. So I've done all the stuff in the back end. Even my whole guesting system, which you've been part of, you get sent to a page, you book your call, you fill out the form. All that is tracked. All that is information is tracked and stored so that I've got information that I can
Wow.
use.
That's really cool stuff. We're going to have to get a chat about this because just as you're talking, I was coming up with even more sinister ideas to help us
100%.
take over the
100%.
world. Yeah, it's too much. It's too much if you know, you're in the flow. You're in the flow there. But there's some, um, there's some people out there that are still singing yesterday.
Yeah,
And they're going to get thrown out in a New Orleans bar on a street called Yesterday. That's where they're going to get thrown out. You're
yeah,
going to ask me something.
yeah. You also?
You worked me over pretty good here.
Yeah, yeah. What are some of the common misconceptions or pitfalls that entrepreneurs should be aware of when they start to implement AI in their operations?
Probably beyond the scope of what I can really answer. But you're going to have checks and balances because AI is not perfect yet. It's going to get better. So I think when you're implementing AI, you still have to have checks and balances. You still need a human to overlook it for now, because I think we're at level 2. Once we get to level 3, especially when we get to AGI, when we get into artificial general intelligence, it's going to realize that, it's unfathomable according to some of the greatest knowledgeable people on artificial intelligence. You still need your checks and balances. You also, if you have staff members, you want to make sure that they're sending out stuff that this has some authenticity. You got to make the AI feel real. If you're going to use it like human made, you don't want to make it like I gave you an example on the SEOs. Like, it's unbelievable, right? I'm too busy to talk back to them and say, like, I don't know what shoebox some of these folks call that. But I think you need to look at your AI, your litmus tests, checks and balances. And if you're going to use it, I used it in certain form letters to improve them. The improvement used a human brain, and then the AI improves it. So I think that's how I would treat it within an organization.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm all for it. Helps with getting back at people's letters, so on and so forth, a lot. I'll give you a really good example of where they can really use it. You get people get into tense situations. Happens with me. I deal with customers where they're taught to, they're bringing in a bulldozer to, someone could be irate, could be a consumer, it could be a retailer, it could be anyone. You bring in the letter and say, listen, this guy's having a meltdown. The gaskets are blowing. Here's the letter. How can I handle this in order to de-escalate the situation? Because you don't want two people that are getting mad at the same time, right? AI's good at that, but and then you can leave it in your draft box and kind of cool it and, cool this urge to get back to them right away when things escalate. Just keep it nice, respectful, stuff like that. I go over that in my negotiation area
yeah.
of the book.
But by the way, the SEO thing, so I get at least 1 to 3 emails every day from
Yes.
YouTube SEOs from Bangladesh.
Yeah.
And they're saying that my SEO is not, my YouTube channel is not visible to people and this and that. So what I do is I play with them and I say, okay, so give me more information. So they give me a little bit more information, and then I use that to then make sure that my back end systems are actually working more, in a, working in the optimal way. And so every bit of information, every time they email me, I gather that information and I say, okay, ChatGPT, how can I make this better? And it gives me the prompt. I put that into Lovable, and then Lovable goes and makes the changes into my website, into my hub. And basically from there, any future scripts and podcast show notes and all that sort of stuff is then getting better and better and better and better. So what I do is I use the information that they give me to actually make my process better.
That's really interesting. That's really cool. I'm discovering the different AIs, the way chat handles me versus Gemini,
Yeah,
and the way X with uh, um, Elon Musk's
Croc. Yeah.
it's yeah, Grok. But Gemini, it starts asking you questions. It seems to want to know more about you, and it wants to become conversational.
For me, like ChatGPT has become like my co-pilot, and
Yeah.
it knows everything about me, and I can just ask it something, and I've also told it I want you to be totally blunt, and I want you to coach me where in areas of my life where I need to step out and get out of my comfort zone. So it will actually say to me, "Hey, this is not the way to be. You've got to take courage, and you've got to start doing this." So it encourages me, and it's amazing, honestly, because you talk to a human, and human will try and give you all the you know all the opinions and this and that, whereas this just is giving you practical information and saying, look, I understand what you're going through. Let's just break it down into small bits and let's get you going, in the right direction. How do people find you, and how do people buy your books and so on?
Well, yeah, I'm on, you can find my books, The Practical MBA in Economics on Amazon. The Guerrilla Guide for Entrepreneurs and the Rest of Us is on Amazon. I'm very easily uh, findable on LinkedIn, and I'm also on Instagram. And so, yeah, those are probably the best ones. My YouTube channel is Off Again, On Again. I did a video on that. I did a video, and it just looks like today, if you look at it carefully. I did artificial. It was called 22 Minutes, a mini documentary, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Propaganda. I did that for my economics book, and so yeah, that's where I pretty well I'm on LinkedIn. It's the best way to find me is on LinkedIn, and I'm all over Amazon. Not hard to find.
Awesome. We'll put those links into the show notes. We'll also have a dedicated page for this episode where all this information will be. So that's cool. Okay. Yeah, let's finish off with the really quick fire questions. And these are like single word, short sentence. Okay, first question for you is, how do you define success, and has that definition evolved for you over time?
Success is, well, when you're very young, it's like, look, I bought some flashy jewelry, flashy things. Later on, success is how can you build the people around you as well? How can you leave a legacy? Are people benefiting from you? Are they saying, you know what, I want to be around this girl, I want to be around this guy. I like learning stuff there. It really makes me feel good. I'm picking up stuff. So if you're helping people around you, that's the best gift we can do in this place called the cosmos.
Yeah.
You
Who's
don't
been your,
think like that when you're 25. You're
no,
just like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
yeah, it's
nice.
different.
Who's been your greatest inspiration and why?
Absolutely my father. And the reason was he taught me discipline, and he had a lot of intellectual dexterity, very cultured, discipline. And I think the other reason is he grew up in abject poverty, and he just knew how to pick himself up. He just knew how to, build around him. A very interesting guy, very interesting, not perfect, but very interesting. He led by example. Yeah. So I would say because of his resilience, his intellectual dexterity, and his sense of discipline. And I didn't like being disciplined when I was young, but that was good. I didn't like it. Yuck. But hey, you
Yeah,
need it. You really do need discipline because nobody can make you get up in the morning to do all this stuff. And I'm not going to go on, but to sit there, oh, look, I'm free. I have my own. No, no, no. You've got not just in the old days, you had your boss. I got my customers. I got my suppliers. I got my staff. I got a lot of people to answer to.
yeah. What is one thing that you believe that others may disagree with?
This is just on a relatively personal thing. Some bosses turn around and park $140,000 cars outside their offices. I don't. Be humble. You know what I like about Warren Buffett? He doesn't make a big salary, by the way. I'm not saying the gentleman's perfect, but he's got a 7 or 8 year old Cadillac. He bought it because there's dents on it from the hailstorm. He got a good deal, paid cash, right? Humility, just like being humble. You want to, you don't, I realize I'm a polarizing figure at some level, but you want people to go read The Art of Seduction. Just watch his videos by Robert,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I don't mean that in a very sexual way, just The Art of Seduction, right? There's some great politicians and political leaders at that, right? They know how to seduce.
yeah. If you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
I never thought about, like, I don't know these questions coming at me, but first of all, my younger self at 24, first of all, it's very hard with the social media today because, I'm not getting enough likes, but I'm going to be very specific. Get rid of all those. My mom used to say, and I'm sure everyone's parents have said, show me your friends and I'll show you who you are. Don't hang around mediocre people, not as a form of snobbery. Hang around people that can challenge you, friends that are doing things with their lives. They don't have to be rich or poor. That's got nothing to do with it. All work is dignified all work is dignified. I was out giving a copy of my book to the Toronto Reference Library. And I sat outside and spoke to a garbage truck driver for 6, 7 minutes. Just talk about his life. It's interesting, what kind of a life. So, yeah, I think what I would do by saying that is, these people that you have when 25 years, they're partying, hoo hoo ha ha, you're clubbing, you're doing all this stuff. That's all going to be gone. Hang around with people where you can push each other, lift each other up, help each other up. And it doesn't matter what facet of life they're in. You know, they could be in the trades, they could be a professor, they could be this, they could be rich, they could be poor. But hang around solid people. Get rid of them. I'd rather have no friends and no associates than a bunch of Gumbies.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Okay. What is one message that you'd like to share with the world?
Well, that's heavy duty. First of all, my dad told me something interesting. Well, one thing I learned from my dad: don't judge people by their education. And remember, he told me, and he's right. I'm borrowing his words. I hope he hears me up in the heavens. A man doesn't make money; money makes a man. That doesn't mean money can make a man. A man makes money. Money should make a man. So if he makes the money, realize where you come from and realize your societal obligations to help people around you. So I go, yeah, that's my message. I think uh, those are the things. The older you get, you kind of
Yeah.
get
Okay.
reconnected to the earth.
Yeah. Last question for you is, what does it mean to be a champion and have a champion mindset?
The champion mindset doesn't give up. A champion mindset, when they see, doesn't suffer from strategic inertia. And what that fancy word means is basically, I'm doing something. Don't worry, this is going to work. Stop, move on, change your game plan, right? Don't become a hostage of your ego. Understand, look, I made a mistake right off the bat. This brand isn't taken off. That program isn't taken off. That software isn't taken off. That AI, let's tweak it. Let's fix it. Let's change it. So that would be my
Awesome.
comment.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate everything you've shared with us today, and I'd love to have you back for another episode at some point. And
It's my pleasure.
I loved what you've shared about branding and entrepreneurship, economics and AI, real world business, and in a practical way. And because at the end of the day, business is not just about selling more products. It's about building a clever brand. It's about understanding people. It's about creating meaning. It's about adapting to change and having courage to break away from what everyone else is doing and being your authentic brand effectively. So, Joe, you've reminded us that the soul of the brand comes from clarity and purpose and authenticity. And whether you're running a business or whether it's a personal brand or whether simply trying to navigate life with more confidence, there is something in this conversation for you. If this episode has got you thinking, please share this with someone who can benefit from this, who can start building something, dreaming bigger, or even needing a fresh perspective. And as always, keep showing up and keep growing, keep living the champion mindset. And lastly, I just want to say you are loved, you're worthy, champion your life, champion your greatness, and have an amazing day.